Hello everybody and welcome back to yet another Total War Warhammer 2 DLC/3LC overview. Today's piece of content is the new 3LC Lord Rakarth, who is leading the Thousand Maws faction for the Dark Elves. Alongside with this 3LC, we're also getting a new patch that improves the Forge of Day, tidies up a few things with the Dark Elves, and also has some general balancing. I'll come to the patch notes at the end, so if you're just here for that, then skip to the chapter in the description or the time on screen now. Now, the first thing I want to talk about off the bat is that the Dark Elves now have 6 starts, just like all the other base game factions from Warhammer 2. This means that the next DLC, whatever it may be, is either going to ruin this perfect symmetry, or it's not going to feature any of the base factions from Warhammer 2 at all, which I think is the more likely and also the more exciting option. I'm not going to go into too much detail on this because I have already talked about my theories on how it could be an Empire DLC along with another Old World faction like the Dwarves or the Vampire Count. If you want to see that video, then there is a link in the description or in the card right now. But today we're here to talk about Rakarth, who is the greatest of all Beastmasters of Karan'Kar. Unsurprisingly, in battle he performs very similarly to a high Beastmaster, but he just does more damage and is a lot tougher. He also has a new ability called the Beast Lord's Gaze, which grants leadership and stops rampage. He has the 2 default mounts of the High Beastmaster of the Scourge Runner Chariot and the Manticore, but he also has a unique mount, which is his Black Dragon, called Brachus. His skills are very similar to a High Beastmaster, but he gets rid of the Name of Power lines and replaces Rapacious Predators with his unique Carrion's Crows line, which features some very powerful buffs for his monster units. Now, along with this 3LC Lord, we're also getting a brand new faction, and along with that, a brand new faction mechanic. The mechanic for the Thousand Maws is the Monster Pens, and it allows them to capture a variety of beasts and send them into battle. This mechanic is extremely powerful and allows you to recruit a massive number of monsters very rapidly. The monsters you can recruit are separated into 4 different groups. The Nagarothi monsters are the Bloodwrack Medusas, the Harpies and the Feral Manticore. The Lustrian monsters are the Feral Carnosaur, the Feral Stegodon and the Feral Cold Ones. The Old World monsters are the Giant Wolves, Explosive Squigs and Feral Mammoths. And the Dark Warped monsters are the Charybdis, the Black Dragons and the War Hydras. You can capture these monsters via a variety of activities. You can capture them by raiding certain regions and certain factions, fighting certain factions, and taking settlements from certain factions and in certain areas. This stuff is very self-explanatory, and if you make an educated guess of how something will work and how you'll get that specific monster, then chances are you'll be right. The higher level your character is, the more chance you have of securing more and more powerful beasts, and then once you capture them, you can instantly recruit them like the Dryken mechanic or Raising Dead. It's worth noting that the monsters taken by a certain lord do not need to be recruited into that same lord's army. Monsters are added to a general pool shared by all the lords in the faction, including Black Arcs, and can be recruited into any army at any time. Also, since it works like the Raised Dead mechanic, that means that you can instantly secure an army of entirely monsters if you have enough backlog. This means you can recruit a new lord, fill his army with monsters immediately, and get him sent out of a full stack the next turn. Alongside this new monstrous mechanic, they are also bringing a new rite, the Convocation of Hunters. Enacting this rite is completely free, but it does incur some additional costs in the dilemma. Enacting this rite gives you the choice of 4 options. You can go for a Old World Expedition, which puts the rite on a 10-second cooldown and gives you a high chance of receiving a large number of common Old World beasts and a small chance of receiving a small number of rare Old World beasts. In case you're wondering what rare or common beasts are, if you just look at the units and look how elite they are, then you can kind of work it out for yourself. Giant Wolves are common, Mammoths are rare, Feral Cold Ones are common, Carnosaurs are rare, and so on and so forth. You can choose to go on a Lustrian Expedition, which will also put the rite in a 10-turn cooldown, but will cost 750 gold. This will give you a high chance of receiving a moderate number of common Lustrian beasts, a small chance of receiving a small number of rare Lustrian beasts. You can head to the beast markets, in which case the rite will be put on only a 5-turn cooldown, but will cost 1000 gold. Doing this will give you a high chance of receiving a moderate number of some common Nagaron beasts, and a small chance of receiving a small number of rare Nagaron beasts. Finally, you can go to the Sorceresses of Grond, which will put the rite in a 15-turn cooldown and cost 1500 gold and 500 slaves. Doing this will give you a guaranteed chance of receiving a small number of very powerful monsters. So far, I've only been able to get a Black Dragon by doing this, but I believe that the Charybdis and the War Hydra would also be available through this option. On top of this mechanic, of course, the faction also has a couple of other effects. All forces do not receive vigor penalties whilst in the raiding stance. This means you can raid as much as you want without being at risk of being slightly weaker if you get attacked. There's also a minus 10% upkeep cost for all monstrous units in all armies. Rakarth's personal army gets plus 8 melee defense and minus 1 to the recruitment duration for all monstrous units. But that being said, if you are recruiting a lot of monsters via the mechanic, you won't ever need to recruit monsters normally, so this part is kind of a bit useless, but it's there. And his starting army in both scenarios is some Shades with great swords, a War Hydra, and a Reaper Bolt Thrower. In both campaigns, Rakarth starts out on the Islands of Albin, which have been a little bit modified since you've last seen them. The islands now feature 2 new unique buildings. First of all, we have the Ogum Stones, which allow the owner to rapidly convert the island into their native form of corruption. They also grant a massive amount of magical power faction-wide, as well as a public order and income bonus to the local province. There is also the Port of Nagranath, which provides a bunch of income, growth, walls to the settlement, and income per turn from slaves. This also grants immunity to high seas attrition faction-wide. Also, it goes without saying, but the increased slave income is exclusive to this faction because, no one else uses slaves. Rakarth has also brought with him a new mission, which is also available to locate Felhat. It is a race to capture 2,500 battle captives, and the first faction to complete this will be granted the opportunity to confederate with Kar and Kar. If you don't wish to confederate them, however, they will just give you a bunch of gold and send you on your merry way. You have until turn 54 to complete it, so it's definitely worth getting a head start and getting on it as soon as you can, but it is very, very doable. Starting off with the Mortal Empires campaign, because let's be honest, it is the more popular one, it is ridiculously easy from what I've played. The Beast Pen mechanic essentially allows you to farm monsters really early on, and then get a full stack of said monsters, and then no one in the game has the units to beat you, because, well, you have War Hydras by turn 7. The mission against Nakai is also ridiculously easy, but may get tweaked due to a few bugs, wherein you beat his first army, and then the reinforcements immediately shatter upon entering the field. But, as I said, this is all early access, thank you very much CA, so this may be patched out by the time it gets to you. Once you finish beating the Norskans and Nakai, you can head on over to Marienburg, which is your initial war, wipe them out, and then move on to the Empire. And I can honestly say I have never taken out the Empire this easily or this quickly. I would not be surprised if this mechanic gets tweaked before it makes it out to the public build, because as it is right now, they are, you could say, stupidly overpowered. It is far too easy to farm monsters, and then far too easy to use those monsters to farm even more powerful monsters, and so on and so forth until no one can stop you. In the Vortex campaign, the story is pretty much the same. He starts in the same place, which is Albion, be it a little bit differently laid out, and you can pretty much do the same exact thing and get the same exact result. You farm monsters by beating the Norskans early on, use those monsters to beat the Nakai mission stupidly early, use the monsters you get from Nakai to beat anyone that you want, and then continually farm monsters until no one can stop you, and that's it, you pretty much win the game. It is also worth saying that he just competes in the standard Vortex race of getting enough scrolls to take control of the Vortex, so there's no complicated mechanics surrounding that. Overall, I'd say this 3LC faction is very, very strong, and while they may not bring anything incredibly unique to the game in terms of units or playstyles, it is a unique playstyle to the Dark Elves, and it is very welcome. I found it to be a lot of fun and one of the easiest Dark Elf campaigns I've ever played, and I'm really not good at the Dark Elves, so if you're looking for a faction to get into them with, then this might be the one for you, because, as I said, very, very easy and very, very fun mechanics. Now we come to the patch notes. So I'm not going to read every single line because, you could just read that, so what would be the point in doing that, but I will give you the highlights and let you know what to expect. So as I mentioned at the start, the Forge of Daith is getting some changes. Instead of being a series of dilemmas, it's now its entirely own panel that offers better visibility and choice over which items you will be getting. You now have full agency over what items you are unlocking, upgrading, and reforging in that order. You're doing this by using a new currency called Favour of Daith, which you can use to spend on different items and upgrades. Because of this, some items have been nerfed since you can now rush them to max rank. These items are the Dreaming Boots, the Twilight Standard, the Eagle Mask, and the Dreaming Bow. They've all been basically toned down on their effects by about a third across the board, and if you're thinking about starting a Sisters of Twilight campaign, you may want to wait, because you will need to restart your campaign to use these changes. As before, the Favour of Daith is gained by winning battles. Apart from now, you can actually choose where it's actually going, rather than just getting some random items. Now for the Dark Elves, Crone Hellbron has also seen some changes. Death Knights have been changed to provide more bonuses at high levels and less penalties at low levels. This is to make the game feel a lot more rewarding when you get to those levels, and a lot less punishing when you're in the low ones. The Blood Voyages have also been changed to allow you to sustain them by completing multiple Death Knights in a row. They can still end if a Death Knight bar gets too low though, so you have to be careful. The effects of Blood Voyages have also been tweaked slightly, so better in some areas and worse than others for a more balanced feel. A couple of her spells, the Greatest Bride of Cain and Champion of Cain, have also been buffed. Locate Felheart has a new unique black art called the Blessed Dread. It has unique benefits such as the Kraken's Claw trait, which provides better growth. It also has 2 unique buildings, which each provide additional bonuses. The Rite of Anathema has also been reworked, and the original effects have been incorporated into Lokir's skill tree. As for Lokir himself, he now has the Kraken Lord as an innate trait, and his unique line has been totally reworked on every skill. Morathi's Dark Manipulator trait has been tweaked slightly to bring some cooldown reduction to the sacrifice to Hecate. Supreme Sorceresses and High Beastmasters have also had some new skills added, which is a general buff. In general, for the Dark Elves, there's been a lot of slight tweaks, but overall it looks like they're getting slightly buffed. Now for some campaign balance tweaks, the Skaven are getting nerfed, lol. Stances have been tweaked so it makes it harder for Skaven to land ambushes. If you're encamped, you now have a 75% chance to defend from getting ambushed by the Skaven, thank the fucking Lord, and that's a pretty big nerf right there. Corruption is now harder to produce and harder to spread to nearby settlements, that's a nerf. There's a reduction to the number of Menace Below users, another nerf. And that's all the campaign balance. Turns out the Skaven are just overpowered. Who thought? Next up is unit balance, and it looks like they're nerfing high Beastmasters, probably to make Rakarth feel more impactful. Aerial's also getting nerfed and is no longer unbreakable. Great Stags are getting tweaked as mounts and as regiments of renown. Norscan Ice Wolves and Giant Wolves are being nerfed versus buildings. Super Squigs are getting slight buffs. Skaven are getting nerfs for the units added by Throt, and the Ancient Salamander is getting a slight nerf to its mass. Finally, ability balance. Black Arc abilities are getting a massive buff and only have a 60-second cooldown no matter what. The Whiplash ability now only targets large units but can hit characters. Squigs Go Boom is getting a massive buff to its damage, and there are more Skaven nerfs for several abilities. Aerial and the Sisters abilities have also been nerfed, and that about wraps up everything. If you enjoyed this video at any point, then please do consider leaving it a like, it really does help out a lot. Let me know what you are most excited for from this free DLC. Is it the Legendary Lord? Is it the general tweaks to the game? Patch notes exciting? Let me know in the comments down below. If you want to see more content like this, I'm going to be covering all the Total War news that I possibly can, including any Total War Warhammer 3 news, so be sure to stay tuned and subscribe so that you do not miss that. It's going to be a very exciting time if we ever get any more news. One more time, thank you very much for watching, and for now, I've been COLONELDAMNEDERS, and I will see you next turn.